Welcome back. In this video, I would like to talk with you about the exploration via the 8 intelligences. So first of all, let's have a look again at the 6 pillars of learning. So as we can see, we have, of course, pillar 1, which is the mindset. We already talked about that now. What we already now also talked about is the multi-sensory intake. So basically, we talked about different kinds of, theories, first of all, and then how to connect these different types of learners. So for instance, we looked at the visual learning theory, the auditory learning theory, the reading/writing theory, and the kinesthetic learning theory. And basically what we did is we now connected these methods with each other, which made it possible for us to connect a little bit better both halves of our brain. Now, what I want to do with you in this video is I'm going to talk with you about the exploration via the 8 intelligences. And what I'm going to do with you is actually quite simple. We are going to have a look at an example, and then I'm going to show you how to explore this example via the 8 intelligences. So let's start. Let's not talk around anymore, and let's begin with this one. We see that we have the 8 intelligences right there. So linguistic intelligence, logical/mathematical intelligence, visual intelligence, bodily intelligence, musical, emotional/social, interpersonal, in parentheses inner, and environmental intelligence. So basically these are the 8 intelligences. And what we want to do right now is you want to explore a certain topic, and you want to connect that topic to our 8 different intelligences. Now, the system that I'm going to present to you is not applicable for every example. And that's why you can see that at 2 and 8, when you look a little bit down at the example, that at 2 and 8, I didn't write anything. Because most of the time, this kind of thinking only works, to a certain extent. It helps you to connect things in your brain, but it doesn't necessarily, act as a magical, formula or something like that in order to improve your brain. The only thing that it really does is training your brain. It helps your brain to rewire. And this concept, again, is the so-called exploration via the 8 intelligences. So, for instance, let's have a look at the example, learn vocabulary. For instance, let's say French teacher. Your French teacher tells you, right, until tomorrow, you're going to learn these 30 words. And you're like, okay, how am I supposed to do that? I cannot learn 30 words in a day. Now, for instance, many people I know can, but if you're a person that is like, I'm good at so many things, but I'm just not good at that, then try to look at these vocabulary from the perspective of the exploration via the 8 intelligences. So you can see that the 8 intelligences are numerated. So 1 is linguistic, 2 is logical, 3 is visual, 4 is bodily, and the same thing I did down there at the example. So number 1 is linguistic, number 2 is logical/mathematical, 3 is visual, 4 is bodily, and so on and so on. Now let's actually have a look at the example, learn vocabulary, and we want to have a look at that example from the first intelligence, which is the linguistic intelligence. And what you want to do in order to learn vocabulary and in order to stress our brain, our muscle up there to grow, is we want to read, write, and talk about these vocabulary. So for instance, we write vocabulary down, we read the vocabulary, and for instance, we talk out loud. We say, for instance, baguette or something like that. Of course, this is very stereotypical, but if you start with French, this might be one of the first 30. But anyway, so basically what I want you to do is I just want you to, follow the, I think, quite normal process, which is reading, writing, and talking about it. I think this is how most people of us were trained to learn vocabulary. But of course, there are different ways. Now, the logical/mathematical approach doesn't really work in this case because, language is not that mathematical, to be frank. But number 3, the visual aspect works. For instance, I want you to draw connections between certain words. So for instance, when you look at the words La Tour Eiffel and Paris, so the Eiffel Tower and Paris, then of course there is a connection. The Eiffel Tower is in Paris. And to draw, for instance, a little image and to draw a certain connection, for instance, you draw, let's say, the land, you draw the state of Paris, and then in there, in the middle, let's say, you draw the Eiffel Tower. That, for instance, would work together with your third intelligence, which is the visual intelligence. So we would basically focus on the visual aspect of the vocabulary. So you draw connections between certain words, you draw something that perhaps reminds you of these words, and this is just one way how you can, learn things more quickly, but also how you can get these things to stay in your memory in the long term. Then number 4, expressing what they mean with your full body. This is now the bodily intelligence, the 4th intelligence. So what we do right now is we express these things. And for instance, in Germany, there's something called the Waldorf schools. And I think it is actually internationally quite famous because in these schools, you learn to dance your name. And I think this is always something that many people feel like is weird. And to be honest, I feel it is weird as well if it's not in the system of the 8 intelligences. So if you look from it from the perspective of the exploration of the 8 intelligences, it really makes sense if you look from it from the perspective of the exploration. But if you don't, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. Then you seem like, nothing against hippies, but you seem like a hippie who doesn't really know too much because you're dancing your own name, and that's kind of weird. You know, people will find you weird. But if you, for instance, express with your entire body, whether it's through dance, whether it's through any other kind of motion, when you do that with your full body and express vocabulary, it will help you to actually remember them. So for instance, if you say, well, I want to remember the term Paris, so Paris basically, then what you want to do is you want to express with your body what Paris feels like, and you want to think about the feeling, then you want to express it with your body. Now, will this help you to actually remember the vocabulary? Yes, it definitely will, because the vocabulary is not just now saved in this one part of your brain, but actually got processed through a much different part of your brain. And when, for instance, now you're in a test and you look at, for instance, you think about how to write Paris, so Paris, then of course what you're going to do is you're going to look basically in your brain automatically where this knowledge could be. And your brain now knows, all right, I got that knowledge in multiple places. So it's much easier to retrieve that knowledge from the brain. So then number 5, singing vocabulary / creating a song from them. Sounds weird, but it works very well. Which is now the 5th part of the exploration of intelligences. This is the 5th intelligence, the musical intelligence. Creating a little song about the vocabulary might seem weird, but it actually is, again, quite helpful. So I can just recommend that to you. Then number 6, emotional / social. For instance, what feelings do you get when reading a word? Which feelings are generally connected with this word? Let's say you have to remember the word bad. So people teach you the word bad. Or for instance, you learn the word in German, let's say schlecht, so which means bad. Let's say you want to remember this word. Then you want to look in every corner of your brain. Where exactly could that knowledge be? And feelings are one of the most strong indicators for our psyche to retrieve information. So for instance, if you have, it's kind of like dark feelings, bad feelings about the word schlecht, then it's easier to retrieve. So what I want you to do is just simply connect different feelings to different words. That will help you to remember them. And then number 7, interpersonal, which is then about the question, what does this word mean to me? Why has it relevance to you? What is so special about that word? Does it have any relevance to you, or do you just have to learn it? If it has any relevance to you, where exactly did this relevance come from? Why is it so relevant to you? And at the end of this process, and the 8th part is again the environmental intelligence, which I think is not really important in this case because it cannot really be applied. But when you're at the end of this process, you have that kind of knowledge, or this word, for instance, saved in 8 different, or in this case now 6 different places in your brain, which will make it extremely easy to retrieve that information when you want to retrieve it. So that was basically it now here for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see each other in the next one.